Welcome, learner, to the deep dive. I want you to just imagine this scenario for a
I
second.
got laid on us.
Right, so you wake up to this abrasive, just blaring alarm. Your head is pounding, your throat is totally dry,
Oh,
and
I know this feeling.
yeah, we all do. And as you're staring at the ceiling, this overwhelming wave of dread just washes over you.
It's the absolute
It
worst.
really is. You start thinking about, the emails piling up, the meetings you have, and you immediately conclude that you are spiraling into a depressive episode.
Right. You think your brain is just fundamentally broken today.
Exactly. You're lying there thinking, I am failing. But what if that feeling of profound psychological despair isn't actually a mood disorder at all?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it?
It is, because what if your brain is just like misinterpreting dehydration, sleep debt, and this massive cortisol spike from that obnoxious alarm tone?
That changes the entire picture.
It changes everything. Today, we are entirely dismantling everything you thought you knew about the mechanics of your own mood.
It's a radical reframing, but an incredibly necessary one. I mean, we tend to operate under this really outdated paradigm.
How so?
Well, we view mental health strictly through the lens of pathology. We basically wait for a full-blown crisis.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we don't wait until we have advanced cardiovascular disease to decide that maybe taking a walk or eating a vegetable is a good idea.
Right, we understand preventative maintenance for our bodies.
We do. But when it comes to our minds, society largely defaults to this binary state. You're either perfectly sane or you're having a breakdown.
There's, like, no middle ground.
None. And the material we're synthesizing today, drawing heavily on the clinical framework popularized by Dr. Julie Smith, proposes something revolutionary.
Because of how simple it is.
Yes, the premise is just that mental health is exactly like physical health.
I mean, she took her clinical therapy insights, brought them to TikTok, where she got millions of followers, and then wrote this foundational book to fill in all the details those short videos leave out.
Right. Why has nobody told me this before is the book. And it shows that the tools required to navigate anxiety and low mood aren't like specialized therapy skills for a clinic.
They're fundamental life skills.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if we actually apply this framework, we are essentially looking at a biological shortcut.
A shortcut to bypassing all that unnecessary suffering we put ourselves through on a daily basis.
Exactly. We become exceptionally well informed about the mechanics of our own brains.
And we really need to transition from being um, passive consumers of psychological buzzwords to becoming active architects of our nervous systems.
I love that phrasing, active architects.
Thanks. But to do that, we have to start by completely redefining what a mood actually is.
Right, because the cultural narrative is so backwards.
It is. We're told that depression or anxiety is merely a random chemical imbalance.
Or like a faulty piece of hardware in your skull.
Yeah, and that's not just reductionist. It's actively disempowering. I mean, if you believe your low mood is purely a spontaneous neurological malfunction.
You strip yourself of all agency.
Exactly. You just become a victim of your own biology.
So if it's not a random chemical misfire, what is it actually? Our sources present this fascinating concept. Mood is a guess.
It's a biological heuristic.
Right. Because your brain is locked inside this dark vault, your skull. It has absolutely no windows.
It can't see the outside world at all.
Right. And it can't inherently understand complex social dynamics like office politics or relationship drama. All it can do is receive a constant stream of raw physiological data from the body.
And based on that data, it makes an educated guess about what is happening and what resources we need to survive.
It's wild to think about.
It is. This is the concept of interoception combined with constructed emotion.
Okay, break that down for us with the morning scenario we talked about.
Sure, let's look at the mechanics. So you stayed up too late, right?
Hmm.
You have a sleep debt.
Check.
You haven't had water in 10 hours, so your blood volume has actually slightly decreased.
Which means your body is technically dehydrated.
Yes, and because of that, that hypovolemia, your heart has to pump a little harder and faster just to maintain normal blood pressure.
Okay, so your heart rate is up.
Right. Then the alarm goes off. That loud noise triggers your amygdala to dump cortisol and adrenaline directly into your bloodstream.
Just a total shock to the system.
Exactly. So your brain, sitting up there in the dark vault, receives this massive influx of sensory data.
Rapid heart rate, low fluid levels, high stress hormones, physical fatigue.
Right. So the brain essentially looks at that dashboard of flashing red lights and says, well, clearly we are under attack or in a state of severe deprivation.
That is mind-blowing. So it registers the physiological tension.
And then it cross-references it with your memory network,
Hmm.
specifically times you felt this exact physical sensation before.
And it just makes its best algorithmic guess.
Right. It says, the heart is racing and we are exhausted. We must be in danger or we're failing at life.
And then that physiological state is consciously experienced by you as the emotion of dread or anxiety or low mood.
Exactly. The physical discomfort literally constructed the psychological state.
That completely flips the script on how we manage a bad day. I mean, if the brain is just running a heuristic based on physical data.
It means emotional regulation is actually a physiological problem first.
Right. So if my brain is just taking in physical clues like dehydration or a loud alarm, does that mean grabbing a large glass of water to restore blood volume?
And maybe changing your alarm to one of those gradual wake-up lights.
Yeah. Does that mean doing those things is basically a psychological intervention?
What's fascinating here is that, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Changing the raw data is an intervention.
It's not just basic self-care like taking a bubble bath. You are actively changing the math your brain uses to calculate your mood.
Now, we must be intellectually honest here, of course. A glass of water is not going to cure severe clinical depression.
No, definitely not. We're not claiming water cures all psychiatric illness.
Right. But we cannot ignore the biology of emotion. By stabilizing our physiological inputs, like blood sugar, hydration, body temperature.
We remove a massive amount of static from the system.
Exactly. We stop feeding the brain the negative biological data it uses to guess that we are miserable.
Which brings us to the mechanics of the downward spiral. This is driven by what the material calls the two-way road.
Ah, yes. The two-way road.
Because the traditional self-help industry loves to preach that thoughts dictate feelings, right?
Oh, all the time. Just think positive.
Manifest success and your mood will follow, but that completely ignores the return lane of the highway.
Feelings absolutely dictate thoughts.
Yeah. When you are biologically depleted or sad, you are literally more vulnerable to negative self-critical thoughts.
It's an evolutionary survival mechanism, honestly. If your body is depleted, your brain assumes you are in a vulnerable state.
And when you're vulnerable, it is much safer to assume the worst.
Right. A rustling in the bushes might just be the wind, but if you are exhausted, your brain tells you it's a predator. Better safe than sorry.
But in the modern world, this translates to your brain prioritizing self-critical thoughts. It just assumes your colleagues are judging you.
And this is exactly how the spiral accelerates.
Yeah.
Your mood drops due to fatigue or stress,
And that low mood generates pessimistic thoughts.
which makes you start to feel hopeless.
And that hopelessness creates this powerful behavioral urge to just withdraw, to cancel plans, to hide in bed.
Yes, and if you give in to that urge and isolate yourself, nothing in your environment improves.
You just stay in the dark room.
Right. So your brain observes this lack of positive reinforcement and solidifies the belief, nothing I do matters. What is the point?
Which drops your mood even further. It's a totally self-sustaining feedback loop. But how do we actually disrupt it?
Yeah.
Because when you're in the middle of that spiral, it just feels like one massive, heavy storm system. You can't see the individual raindrops.
The clinical intervention here is something called a cross-sectional formulation.
Okay, tell us about that.
You have to take the monolithic experience of a bad mood and dissect it into 4 distinct quadrants:
Which are?
thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, and behaviors.
Okay, so breaking it down into pieces.
Exactly. When you force yourself to break it down, asking, what is the exact sentence running through my mind? What is the granular emotion?
Is my chest tight? What is my immediate urge to act?
Yes. When you do that, you demystify the storm. You see the individual gears of the spiral turning.
And once you isolate the gears, you can intervene on just one of them to jam the mechanism.
Precisely. You don't have to fix everything at once.
But if the brain is just guessing our mood, and it knows that isolating or ruminating makes us feel worse, why does it push us toward behaviors that actively destroy our well-being? This is the paradox that drives me completely crazy.
It is frustrating, isn't it?
It really is. Like, when I feel terrible, I know logically that going for a walk or calling a friend will help, but the biological urge to lie in the dark, eat heavily processed food, and scroll on my phone is almost overpowering.
That happens because your brain, in a state of distress, is not prioritizing your long-term psychological fulfillment,
What is it prioritizing?
survival, through what we call the instant relief trap.
The instant relief trap.
Right, when emotional discomfort hits, your nervous system registers an allostatic load, That's a spike in stress that costs biological energy.
And the brain is an energy-conserving organ.
Exactly. It wants the quickest, cheapest, most efficient exit from that discomfort.
So it defaults to numbing
Yeah.
behaviors.
Numbing is highly efficient in the short term. Drinking alcohol, binge eating sugar, or mindlessly scrolling through short-form video content.
It rapidly alters your neurochemistry.
It does. It spikes dopamine and temporarily suppresses the discomfort.
So your brain pushes you toward these behaviors because functionally they do work, they numb the pain.
But the trap, however, is that the relief is entirely borrowed against the future.
Oh, wow. Borrowed against the future.
Yeah, once the alcohol metabolizes or the sugar crashes or you finally put the phone down, the original emotional pain returns.
But now it returns compounded. You have physiological lethargy, a disrupted dopamine baseline, and the guilt of having wasted the day.
Exactly. The instant relief mechanism is basically a biological payday loan with an exorbitant interest rate.
That is such a brilliant way to put it, a biological payday loan. And while we are sitting there, trapped in that lethargy, our brain starts deploying what are essentially cognitive defense mechanisms that have gone rogue.
You're talking about cognitive biases.
I am, because when our mood drops, our brain doesn't just feel bad. It actively distorts our perception of reality to match the bad mood.
It meticulously edits the world to fit the narrative.
Let's look at the mechanics of these traps, starting with mind reading.
Well, humans are obligate social creatures, right?
Yeah.
For hundreds of thousands of years, our survival depended entirely on remaining in the good graces of our tribe.
Because if you were exiled, you died.
Literally. Therefore, we evolved to constantly scan the facial expressions and behaviors of others, trying to guess what they're thinking about us.
But when your mood is low and your brain is in a vulnerable state, it applies a strict negative bias to those guesses.
It really does. Your friend takes 4 hours to text back, and instead of assuming they're busy,
You assume they're furiously angry with you.
or your boss is quiet in a meeting, and you assume you're going to be fired by the end of the day, you accept these threat-based guesses as empirical facts.
It's a complete projection of our internal state onto external actors. And I think that ties closely to another bias, overgeneralization.
Oh, definitely.
Like, you spill milk on your shirt in the morning, and instead of viewing it as a localized 5-minute inconvenience,
You extrapolate it to your entire identity.
yes, you say, today is ruined, I am a disorganized mess, nothing ever goes my way.
Which is driven by the brain's desire to find patterns even when none actually exist.
Right. And then we have emotional reasoning, which might be the most insidious bias of all.
Because emotions are generated by physiological sensations, right? A racing heart, a tight chest. So they feel undeniably real.
They bypass the rational prefrontal cortex entirely.
Exactly. Emotional reasoning is the belief that because I feel this way, it must be objectively true.
So if you feel like a failure after a difficult project, your brain determines that you are a failure.
You treat feelings as facts. You elevate a temporary, biologically constructed guess into a permanent statement of identity.
Wait, I need to push back on that for a second.
Okay.
Because we are constantly told in modern therapy culture that our feelings are valid and that we need to trust our intuition.
Right, that's everywhere.
So if we are now saying that our feelings are essentially biased, unreliable guesses, isn't that invalidating?
What's fascinating here is the distinction between validating an experience and accepting it as objective truth.
Okay, tell me more.
Your feelings are absolutely valid as a biological experience. If you feel terrified, the cortisol in your veins is real. The physiological suffering is real, and it deserves compassion.
But the narrative isn't.
Exactly. The narrative your brain attaches to that feeling, the conclusion that you are worthless or that everyone hates you, is highly unreliable.
So we must validate the emotion while rigorously cross-examining the thought.
Validate the biology, question the narrative.
That makes perfect sense. Which leads us to the mental filter.
Ah, the filter.
This is when you selectively fixate on the negative data and entirely blind yourself to the positive. Like, you give a presentation at work and 99 people are nodding and smiling.
But one person in the back row is frowning or looking at their phone.
Right. And you will obsess over that one frown for weeks. You just skim past all the praise.
Exhausting.
Is the mental filter essentially like a social media algorithm in our own brain?
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Where the algorithm just realizes that outrage and fear keep you engaged longer than contentment, so it aggressively filters out the good news and feeds you a curated timeline of threats.
I validate that analogy completely. The mechanism behind it is evolutionary mismatch.
Meaning what, exactly?
Yeah. In a hunter-gatherer environment, the mental filter kept you alive. If you're sitting in a beautiful meadow, but there's a slight rustling in the tall grass.
You better ignore the flowers and focus on the grass.
Right, because your brain must fixate on the rustling.
Yeah.
It could be a leopard. But in a modern corporate office, there are no leopards.
There is only an email from your manager with a minor, tiny critique.
But your brain applies the ancient leopard detection algorithm to the email. It creates a disproportionate state of panic and filters out all the praise you receive that same day.
And if you add musts and shoulds to that, the perfectionist trap and all or nothing thinking, you have a recipe for total paralysis.
If I don't get 100%, I'm a total failure.
Right. It's the brain's desperate need for certainty under stress. It demands binary outcomes.
It really does.
So we have a brain that misinterprets physical data, seeks destructive instant relief, and runs ancient algorithms that distort our reality. How do we actually step in and take the wheel?
We have to intervene.
How do we stop the car before it goes off the cliff?
We do it by developing metacognition. Metacognition is, simply put, the practice of thinking about your own thoughts.
Thinking about thinking.
Yes. It is the neurological activation of the prefrontal cortex to observe the activity of the limbic system.
I enthusiastically love the analogy used in the source material to explain this. Jim Carrey in the 1994 movie The Mask.
It's such a perfect visual.
It really is. In the film, when Jim Carrey puts the magical wooden mask directly onto his face, it completely fuses with him.
It controls his actions.
Right. It alters his personality and it dictates his reality. He becomes the mask. But when he reaches up, physically pulls the mask off his face and holds it at arm's length.
It instantly loses all its power over him.
Exactly. It hasn't disappeared. It's still right there in his hand. He can see it clearly. But because he has created distance, he realizes it's just a carved piece of wood.
And we must do this with our thoughts. When we fuse with a thought, we are wearing the mask.
In clinical terms, this is called what?
Cognitive diffusion. And the mechanism we use to create that arm's length distance is mindfulness.
Now, wait. Mindfulness has a bit of a branding problem, doesn't it?
Oh, it's been thoroughly commodified and misunderstood. People think it's about emptying your mind or achieving a state of blank, Zen-like peace.
Right. Which feels impossible.
Because it is. If you sit in a room and try not to think about your anxieties, you are actively concentrating on your anxieties.
It's the classic, don't think of a pink elephant problem.
Exactly. The brain cannot process a negative instruction without first conceptualizing the target. Instead, mindfulness is about taking executive control of the spotlight of attention.
I like that. The spotlight.
Imagine your attention as a physical, high-powered spotlight. By default, it whips around in the dark, illuminating whatever loud, threatening thought the amygdala throws up.
It just highlights the danger.
Right. Mindfulness is the practice of noticing where the spotlight is currently shining, grasping the handle, and intentionally aiming it somewhere else.
So you aren't suppressing or destroying the negative thought.
No, you are simply removing the illumination from it.
And regaining control of that spotlight is critical because of the neurological damage caused by rumination.
Rumination is incredibly destructive.
The source material describes it as the thoughts washing machine.
That's a very apt description.
It's when you take a painful memory or an anxiety about the future and you toss it into the drum and just let it spin on high heat for days.
Biologically, rumination occurs when the brain's default mode network becomes hyperactive. And the danger lies in neuroplasticity.
The idea that neurons that fire together wire together.
Precisely. Every time you replay that painful memory, you are stimulating a specific neural circuit.
Strengthening it.
Yes. The brain responds by wrapping those neurons in thicker myelin sheaths, which essentially upgrades that neural pathway from a dirt road to a high-speed fiber optic cable.
Wow. So you are physically optimizing your brain to experience that specific pain more efficiently in the future.
Unfortunately, yes. This is how acute distress hardwires itself into chronic depression.
Okay, so how do we unplug the washing machine? Because when I'm ruminating, I know I'm doing it, but I feel totally powerless to stop the cycle.
You have to utilize an active interruption technique.
What does that look like?
When you catch the spotlight locked onto a ruminative loop, you must break the physical and cognitive patterns simultaneously.
Yep.
You can physically hold your hand up and say the word stop out loud.
Literally shouting stop at yourself.
Yes. The firm vocalization forces the brain to process auditory and motor functions, which interrupts the internal narrative.
Okay, and then what?
Then, you must immediately change your physical state. Stand up, walk to a different room, step outside into the cold air. You use physical movement to shift your neurological state.
And then?
And then you ask an executive function question. What would I do right now if I was operating at my best?
Wait, if the book says pushing emotions away is like fighting waves at the beach like, you just get knocked down and exhausted, isn't shouting stop at my own brain just another way of pushing it away?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to make a vital clinical distinction between an emotion and a behavior.
Okay, lay it out.
An emotion, the physiological sensation of grief or sadness or fear, is the wave. You absolutely must let that somatic experience exist. You allow your heart to race, you allow the tears to fall, you accept the tightness in your chest.
You do not repress the biology.
Never. Rumination, however, is not an emotion. Rumination is a cognitive behavior. It is the voluntary act of endlessly churning a narrative.
Oh, I see.
You are allowing the feeling of sadness to exist, but you are refusing to let your thoughts obsessively churn the story to artificially keep the sadness alive.
Oh, that is a brilliant distinction. The emotion is the weather. You let it rain.
Exactly.
But rumination is choosing to stand outside in the freezing rain, refusing an umbrella and complaining about how cold it is. You can't stop the rain, but you can step out of the washing machine.
Beautifully put. You stop the behavior that is maximizing your misery.
No. All of these metacognitive tricks, controlling the spotlight, diffusing from biases, interrupting rumination, they're all top-down interventions, right?
Yes, the mental gymnastics.
But those cognitive tricks will entirely fail if the biological foundation of your house is rotting. Let's look at the unglamorous foundational habits, the unsung heroes.
The defense players.
Yes. I look at this through the analogy of a world-class football team.
Wow.
Imagine you spend millions assembling the greatest strikers in the world. They are flashy, brilliant, and they score incredible goals.
Like your metacognitive skills.
Exactly. But if you pull all your defense players off the pitch, it does not matter how good your strikers are. Opposing teams that shouldn't even be in your league will walk right past you and score.
That's very true.
Diet, sleep, routine, and connection are your defense players. They aren't glamorous, but if you sideline them, you will easily be defeated. Let's look at the biology of exercise first.
The clinical data on exercise as a psychiatric intervention is staggering.
We're not just talking about getting a six-pack here.
No, we're talking about utilizing movement for biological regulation. Even small amounts of exercise fundamentally alter neurochemistry.
How so?
It promotes neurogenesis, the birth of new neurons, particularly in the hippocampus, which governs memory and emotion regulation.
And it affects dopamine too, right?
Yes, regular cardiovascular movement upregulates dopamine receptors. It physically increases your brain's overall capacity to experience joy and motivation across all domains of your life.
And the environment where you exercise matters immensely. There was a study exploring cognitive behavioral therapy outcomes based on environment.
The forest versus hospital study.
Yes. They took patients undergoing CBT for severe depression and split them into two groups. Group A did their therapy in a sterile clinical hospital room.
Makes sense.
But Group B did the exact same therapy with the exact same protocols out in a forest setting. The forest group had a remission rate 61% higher than the hospital group.
61%.
Just exposing the human nervous system to nature, to fractal patterns in trees and natural light, radically amplifies the healing process.
It highlights how deeply our nervous systems are tethered to our evolutionary environment. And this ties directly into sleep as well.
Sleep is a big one?
Sleep deprivation is the fastest, most reliable way to induce a psychiatric crisis. When you are sleep deprived, the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, becomes highly reactive.
While the prefrontal cortex, the logical brake system, is impaired.
Right. And your heart rate variability plummets, meaning your autonomic nervous system loses its willpower and flexibility to bounce back from stress.
One of the most practical tools to protect that sleep is externalizing your cognitive load. We all know the torture of hitting the pillow, only to have our brains suddenly start screaming about taxes.
Or unread emails, or an argument from 5 years ago.
Yes, because the brain knows you are finally undistracted, it uses that time to process unresolved threats.
So what's the tool?
By keeping a worry list beside your bed and physically writing those tasks down, you are essentially offloading the RAM of your brain onto the paper,
You're providing the nervous system with concrete proof that the threats have been captured.
giving it permission to finally power down.
And once you wake up, getting morning sunlight within 30 minutes of waking is paramount. It clears out the sleep chemical, adenosine, and starts a timer for melatonin production later.
Then we have routine. To the human nervous system, routine equals safety.
It reduces the cognitive load of decision-making.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Of all the defense players, the most critical for human survival isn't even internal, it's external.
Social connection.
Yes. The framework we are exploring doesn't just present social connection as a nice, warm, fuzzy luxury. It equates human connection to a literal biological mechanism for resilience.
Which is fascinating, because when you fall into a low mood, the instant relief trap tells you to isolate.
I'm a burden, I'll go out when I feel better.
But isolating removes the exact biological mechanism required for recovery. We are a deeply social, interdependent species.
Historically, a lone human separated from the tribe was dead human.
Therefore, isolation is interpreted by the deepest parts of our brainstem as an acute existential threat.
So it keeps our sympathetic nervous system locked in high alert.
Conversely, proximity to safe, familiar humans signals to the brain that we are protected.
And you don't even need to have a profound, tear-filled conversation about your trauma, do you?
Not at all. Simply co-regulating, like sitting silently in a coffee shop or watching a movie with a friend without speaking, actively shifts your nervous system from threat to safety.
I love the cordial and water analogy for how these defense players operate.
It's a great visual.
If you have a massive pitcher of crystal clear water and you drop in one single drop of red fruit cordial, you don't notice a difference. The water still looks clear.
Right, one late night, one missed walk, one canceled dinner.
It's just one drop. You think you're perfectly fine. But if you keep dropping it in every single day, soon the entire color and taste of the water changes.
We often don't realize our foundation has rotted until the water is completely red and we are in a crisis.
It beautifully illustrates how mundane daily habits accumulate to define our overall psychological state.
And that accumulation requires continuous daily action, which brings us to the most profound paradigm shift of this entire deep dive.
The listener might be sitting here agreeing with everything we've said about exercise, sleep, and connection, and thinking,
Logically, I know I should do all of that, but I just don't have the motivation.
yes, the great motivation myth. Society treats motivation as if it were a fixed personality trait.
Sarah goes to the gym every day because she is a motivated person. I am lazy.
Right. Or we view it as a strict prerequisite. We believe we must feel the desire to act before we can actually take the action. But the science destroys this idea.
Completely. Motivation is not a trait, and it is not a prerequisite.
What is it then?
It is a fleeting, unreliable emotion. And more importantly, motivation is usually the byproduct of action.
Ah, the byproduct.
You do not feel motivated to go to the gym while you are lying under a warm blanket. You feel motivated leaving the gym after the physical action has generated the dopaminergic momentum.
To hack this system, we have to deeply understand what is actually stopping us from acting. We must distinguish between procrastination and anhedonia.
Those are very different things.
Procrastination is avoiding stress. It's an emotion regulation problem.
Right. You put off doing your taxes because the task generates anxiety. Avoiding it provides instant relief.
But anhedonia is the literal loss of the capacity to experience pleasure from things you previously loved. It's common in depression.
Yes, it's a neurological blunting of the reward circuitry.
And when you are paralyzed by either of those, you have to deploy a behavioral tool called opposite action.
This is a powerful concept.
Dr. Smith illustrates this brilliantly with the polo-mints game she played with her sisters.
Oh, I love this analogy.
They would place a polo-mint, a hard ring-shaped candy on their tongues. The game was to see who could go the longest without crunching it.
Which is so hard. When you have hard candy in your mouth, the biological urge to bite down is overwhelming.
It feels like an involuntary reflex. But by paying intense, mindful attention to that urge and consciously choosing not to bite, you discover a gap.
A tiny space between an impulse and an action.
Yes. Opposite action is taking that gap and using it to execute the exact opposite of what your emotion is demanding.
Your emotion screams, "Stay in bed, the world is terrible."
You use the gap to throw the covers off and put your feet on the floor.
And we need to be transparent about why opposite action feels so agonizingly difficult.
Why is it so hard?
We can conceptualize this through the metaphor of the brain jungle. Your brain is essentially a dense, overgrown jungle.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Every habit you have is a path through that jungle. The bad habits you've relied on for years, hitting snooze, doom scrolling, are wide, paved, clear highways.
Your brain loves them because traveling down a paved highway requires absolutely zero cognitive energy.
Exactly. But when you try to establish a new, healthy habit like opposite action to exercise, You are standing at the edge of the jungle with a dull machete.
You have to actively hack your way through thick vines and underbrush.
It requires a massive expenditure of metabolic energy, and your stressed brain will constantly try to shove you back onto the easy paved highway of your bad habits.
So how do you make it easier?
Consistency and repetition. Every time you force yourself to hack through the jungle, the path gets a little wider. Eventually it paves itself and becomes automatic, like brushing your teeth.
But in the beginning, while you are exhausted and hacking through the vines, brute force willpower will fail. You have to use smarter tools, like self-compassion.
This is crucial. When people stumble and take the old highway, they usually attack themselves. I'm a failure.
But biologically, self-criticism generates shame. Shame is a threat response that spikes cortisol and causes the urge to hide and avoid. It kills motivation.
Self-compassion, speaking to yourself with the objective kindness you would offer a beloved friend, actually lowers the threat response.
Yeah.
It increases drive and outcomes.
You also have to outsmart your future unmotivated self through pre-planning. You can use the DBT pros and cons list.
Right. Mapping out the pros and cons of changing, but also the pros and cons of staying exactly the same.
And alter your environment. Engineer it so you don't have to rely on willpower. Put the alarm clock across the room in the bathroom. Make the bad habit physically difficult to execute.
Yes, environmental friction is your friend here.
Okay, I have to stop and push back. If I'm exhausted and I'm constantly forcing myself into this exhausting opposite action to do things I hate, just to pave a new path in the brain jumble, won't I just burn out completely?
That is a critical risk.
Yeah.
And it's exactly why the book insists on a specific rule. Balance effort with replenishment.
Replenishment.
The cultural myth of perseverance is that you just blindly grind forward until you succeed or collapse. But look at elite athletes.
They nap all the time.
They do. They push their neurology to the limit, but they are equally rigorous about their recovery. We need to use breaks to actually rest.
And we have to be brutally honest about what rest is. Lying on the couch scrolling through social media for an hour is not rest.
No, it's a state of physical immobility combined with hypercognitive stimulation.
You are still bombarding your nervous system. True rest is sensory reduction. Closing your eyes, stepping outside, taking incredibly small breaks.
Exactly. Keep the changes small.
So let's say we do all of this. We hack our motivation, build our defense players, catch every cognitive bias. Are we immune to suffering?
Absolutely not. Life is completely indifferent to our optimization.
Life will still deliver grief, betrayal, illness, and emotional pain. So how do we process it without breaking?
It begins with a powerful realization Dr. Smith had while doing mindful running.
Tell us that story.
She was overwhelmed with stress regarding academic exams. She went for a run on a long gravel track through the woods. Initially, her mind was frantically buzzing with anxiety and she was expending immense energy trying to fight the tension.
Trying to force herself to relax.
Right. But then, she shifted her metacognitive approach. She simply allowed the anxiety to run alongside her. She focused entirely on the percussive sound of her feet hitting the gravel.
Distracting, then returning to the sound of her feet.
Yes, by not fighting the tension, she was allowing it to metabolize and pass.
But to effectively let a feeling wash over you, your brain has to be able to identify what the feeling actually is. This brings us to the vocabulary of pain and the feeling wheel.
This is so important. So often we use blunt, low-resolution language. We say, I'm angry or I'm depressed.
And those broad terms severely limit the brain's ability to process the experience.
When you use a feeling wheel and force yourself to find granular words, realizing you aren't just angry, but rather alienated, disillusioned, or vulnerable, you engage affect labeling.
Finding the precise vocabulary forces the prefrontal cortex to activate, which literally regulates the nervous system.
It turns down the volume of the threat response in the amygdala.
But we also have to acknowledge that there are moments when the threat response is so high, like a panic attack, that you can't logic your way out. You can't find the perfect vocabulary word.
In those moments, you must look toward DBT self-soothing. You must send physical safety signals to the brain.
I enthusiastically love the self-soothing box for this.
It's a wonderful tool.
Because when you are drowning in a panic attack, your brain loses all problem-solving ability. So you build a physical shoebox before the crisis hits.
Inside, you place items that target your physical senses.
Right. You put in strong lavender essential oil, a sour candy to shock your taste buds, photographs of time you felt entirely safe, a specific bilateral stimulation playlist.
And a handwritten note to yourself with a direct command.
Yeah.
Call this specific friend at this number.
It bypasses the panic brain's inability to think. You just open the box and follow the physical instructions to manually override your nervous system.
It is a profound strategy. But we must also address how these concepts apply externally. How do we support others?
Because the urge is always to fix it.
Yes, but when someone you love is hurting, the book clearly states,
Yeah.
just be there. Do not offer unprompted advice. Listen and hold space.
And regarding grief, which isn't just about death, it's about any significant ending offer practical help.
Right. Bring them a meal. Do their laundry. They don't need profound philosophical wisdom. They need practical support to relieve their allostatic load.
So what does this all mean? If we are naming our emotions specifically, letting them wash over us and soothing our bodies, are we essentially just parenting ourselves?
This raises an important question about identity. Yes, in a sense, we are self-parenting, but we are actually building a new identity.
How so?
We are deciding, I'm a person who takes care of myself. We're aligning our actions with our values rather than just reacting to our fleeting feelings.
That is an incredibly powerful place to land. Let's summarize the massive journey we've taken today. We realized mood is a bodily guess. We identified mental traps and learned to control the spotlight.
We built our defense players.
We learned to act opposite to a lack of motivation and to soothe the nervous system. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought.
Based on the language section of the source text.
Exactly. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis suggests that the structure of a language determines how a native speaker perceives experience. If our ability to process our reality is limited by the vocabulary we have to describe it, what parts of your own life are you currently unable to solve simply because you haven't yet learned the word for what you are feeling?
Could expanding your vocabulary literally expand your capacity for happiness?
It's something to think about. Thank you for diving deep with us today, learner. Our challenge to you is simple. Apply just one small tool from this deep dive today. Drink a massive glass of water, write a worry list, or just pull a mask off one negative thought. You don't have to build the whole house with one tool. We'll see you next time.